we are going to be talking about kind of like the history of like prison design, some like practices in prison design, like some like and we're going to look at like a one location. So I was looking at Modern Marvels, and I watched it today because I was trying to get some notes on like some pieces I would like to help lead into different parts of the stream. So we're gonna start with this fella here. I think it's what he talked about was pretty important.
You know, you can't understand what a step forward fourth generation radiopodular jail planning was till you understand what sheriffs had to put up with before. You know, you would have this box, and then you would have...
Okay, so right now he's kind of talking about the path of travel. At least that's what this drawing is trying to convey.
And you'd have a jailer come in from one end, and it was all blind. If the jailer didn't walk up and down the corridor, often within close proximity to the grated bar fronts of the cells, he or she didn't know what was going on inside their own jail, if prisoners were being assaulted, if other things were happening. So that was sort of...
How am I them spreading Fauci?
Okay. First generation. Then what happened is they started doing a day room so that you came in here, and this is during the day, and prisoners came out of their cells and they were in this common meeting room that was equipped with tables or a TV or what have you. And that was sort of second generation, all right?
Okay.
The third generation actually created a mezzanine where...
So when I was looking at Modern Marvels, I'm gonna be messing that up. They talk about like the original kind of like prison was more sort of like holding cells, and well, it was more like religious, like kind of like more handled by the church within their own sort of ranks, and didn't become more like secular and become like more of a non-religious aspect till later.
You would have cells maybe around a central point, and you had a control station here, and that control station really had much better visibility into all the cell fronts than was previously the case.
We just hopped into we're gonna be talking about like prison design, architecture, a little bit of history. Watching this guy because he's kind of like giving sort of like a rundown of like the sort of the evolution of like prison architecture. I thought it was like a cute, like a not a cute video, but like a fun, like sort of like dipping our toe in at the beginning.
Would be what we would call the third generation. And it would have a mezzanine, you know, and the mezzanine had stairs, you know, and so you had cells stacked up. And what it did is it brought a greater number of cell fronts within closer visual proximity to the control officer. And this was a big step forward in jail design or prison design throughout the United States. All right. Now, for a state prison, it may have worked because you have a much larger number of prisoners, where you're divided into discrete numbers.
Well, another aspect of this is that prefabricated design eventually became like a very important part of at least modern prisons. Because he's talking about like stacking prisons, but usually it wasn't exactly like how he's describing it. It was a lot more... Stacking prisons is a more of a modern sort of concept for how prisons are laid out today. A lot of them, the older ones I was looking at, have been more like long, like single-story buildings. One of them we're gonna look at is kind of like that, but like bringing prefab into prison design has its ups and downs. Its pricing is a lot better, but it is more like homogenized, in my opinion. But like that's kind of like the expectation with the prison. I'll talk a bit about it because I have a doc that is basically like the standards of like prison design.
let's say, and this might be 60 to 80 prisoners
Well, go take care of that name. I'll be
in
here.
this day room. And that worked. The problem is for county jails in particular, if you had a 100 bed or a 60 bed or a 200 bed, smaller numbers, how do you divide this up into discrete groups that can be classified more easily into smaller groups of 8 or 12 or 16 or 24, right? Because in a smaller jail, you still have the same classification challenges you have in a larger facility, you just have a smaller number. Okay, so what happened is we started looking.
Yeah, he has to take in, as he's talking about, he has to take into consider the design for scale and like proportion and ratio to people to each location that they're going to be building.
And this would have been in the early to mid 80s. Okay, we started looking at the idea of that same control station.
Oh, okay,
But
okay,
this
okay, okay,
time-
okay. Yes, yes. So this design is more like a kind of like the Panopticon, but not really. It's more like he can see out. There's windows everywhere. We're gonna eventually get to like a part in the Modern Marvels where they kind of show like a 3D visual representation of this that looks really cool. So you get like a better idea of just mind's eye. Now, you don't have to think it too hard with your mind's eye to kind of visualize what he's trying to show in this sketch.
You have a sally port, a corridor around the control station, which is enclosed in glass. You have a series of pods surrounding that control station that Mr. or Miss Jailer can still look into, just like they could before. But this time, this might be 8, this is 16, 16, 12, 8, 8, 12. And those
Oh, okay. So the beds
pods
are pods.
can
Okay.
be tailored to reflect the classification that's found within the crime or sentencing pattern that particular jurisdiction has experienced. And you can research this, which is what we do, as the back half of what's called needs assessment. In other words, it's not just to determine the number of prisoners, male and female, that a jurisdiction needs, but you're also trying to break those groups down into discrete groups: bad check riders, lower security, axe murders, higher security, cop killers, God forbid, and so forth. And you begin to determine those patterns and let all of these pods reflect those sentencing patterns, so that what you're arming the sheriff and his jail staff with is the most powerful jail management tool of all: the opportunity to use a good proactive classification system for the operation, the management of their...
Okay, so he's just talking about like managing their expectation with who is in which cell. So that's kind of why I went in with that video. So I'm gonna go down here. So this one is we're gonna get like a virtual tour of a county jail. This one's pretty interesting to look at. I'll drop it down just because.
Hi, I'm Corrections Deputy Rachel Smith, and I've been with Pierce County Sheriff's Department since March of 2021. Let me give you
I think this one's interesting just because you get to see kind of like a guided tour.
So this is the new jail vehicle Sally Port. When individuals are arrested and brought in, they're first given a pat search right here, and then they proceed into booking to begin the booking process. Let me show you what that's about. So individuals are brought in up to this booking bar right here, where they're given an additional pat-down search. They begin taking off all their property and handing it over to the corrections deputies to be placed in the property bag, as well as put in the body scanner to get scanned for any drugs or weapons. When individuals are brought into
this
the
right
facility,
here I found interesting.
all their property is placed in a property bag.
So like I always wondered like where exactly do they keep people's like belongings when you get brought to jail? And at least for this like location, it's like in this like sort of like it's clothing, not clothing zip, but like if you were to like put like a suit or something in a bag sort of like this is where they keep your belongings until you let go. I always thought they keep it like in a locker or something, not like literally in a bag.
and that will remain back here until they are released. Once individuals have been cleared from the scanner, they're placed in a jail uniform. They take off all their personal clothes and put on the jail uniform. Right here in this dress-out room here, some individuals do require a strip search based on their charges. Once individuals have been booked into the system, they're brought over here so that they can get their photos done as well as their fingerprints. Once their fingerprints and photos are taken, they're brought over here to speak with the nurse, and they provide all medical information required.
See that the blue lives, red lives matter flag. Oh boy.
So that they can be medically treated while in the facility. After that, they're placed in a holding cell to be brought over to intake. When escorting individuals back to the new jail for release, they're brought back here. If individuals have been transported from the main jail, they'll still be in cuffs. So here we would remove their handcuffs, and then
Charlie, second floor, that's where I got it.
they would have a seat on the bench. If the release officer is ready for them, they'd be brought over here, and they would begin the release process in giving them back their property out of their property bag, and then releasing them out this door over here. This is the release office. Right here is the release window. Some individuals that would come here are people that are turning themselves
this is...
Charlie. Looks
okay,
like,
here we go. Actually get into the jail proper. I was like wondering where
looks
we're
like
getting
we're
into
dealing
that.
with the
That
aftermath
was the
of
beginning
the
of
fight
this.
into Charlie. So just two. So we're into Charlie. Looks like there was a fight. The unit officer observed it, told them to stop fighting, and they did. He placed one of them outside in between the units, and escorts arrived to assist them out of the unit. Once we arrived, it was all over, and we no longer need for the assistance. So this is one of the units in the new jail. It's called 2 Charlie. We currently have a little over 80 inmates being able to be housed in this unit.
Man, it's crowded. It looks crowded. IMO.
These are lower level offenders with good behavior, so that's why they're housed in this open dorm setting with the desk in the unit as well. We're on the upper tier of 2 Charlie.
I think, trying to remember, I think one of the videos I was looking at for this, I think it may have been the My Marvels one. It was talking about like that sort of thing.
As you can see, they have bunk beds
I would have to like
here.
scrub
Again, it's
for it
open
again.
dorm, so they don't have their own cells. They're all housed up here together with a shared bathroom and shower. So this right here is the laundry room. This is where they wash all of the inmate uniforms.
I love motorcycles.
The inmates are provided with clean clothes twice a week in their units, and we have inmate workers that are responsible for assisting with cleaning all of the laundry. This right here is the kitchen. The trustees assist with cooking, cleaning, and prepping food for the remainder of the jail. All the trays are then supplied
So this is
to the
more
main
like
jail and the new jail.
a small-time modern like look at a prison. So we're not gonna. It's
So
probably
this is central control. This is where you are responsible for operating the movement of gates throughout the facility.
Okay. So, the older gentleman did basically talked about this specific setup. This one is a bit more closed off than the other one we're going to see in Modern Marvels, but this looks very, very close to what they were describing.
When a code blue or a medical emergency is called within the facility, it's extremely important to get to the gate right away, open the gate, and let all responding individuals into the unit. You're then responsible for calling the code over the radio to ensure that all of your
You see, oh, it's a bit fuzzy, but we can see like the layout of the prison here. The cross shape and everything, all the units are kind of placed around this main shape, if I'm understanding this correctly.
workers hear the code and are able to respond in a timely manner. If there is a medical emergency, in addition to calling the code and opening the gates, you will need to call for 911
tilt my head to
for
see
medical aid so that they can arrive and assist the individual with their needs. So we left the new jail and now we're headed to the main jail. This is where more serious offenders are housed with more severe behavior problems, as well as we do have general population unit.
That is like a very constant thing that I see, that there is like a very strict distinction between like say like low harm offenders versus like high harm offenders, where like there is a what's sort of looking at a expectation of more strict like control of their behavior and like their movement, the more like the more dangerous criminal is. I was trying to get that word out.
But
Drink
they
some
still
water.
have more serious charges than individuals that are housed in the new jail. We're now entering 3 South. This is our maximum security unit. This is where we house all of our most serious offenders with behavioral issues and very serious charges. A lot of these individuals have assaulted staff, and so they're now placed in here on security alerts, requiring 2 COs to get them out of their units for their timeout. We currently have 2 tiers of this unit with 5 cells on each tier, and they are double-doored units, so you have to enter the outer door and enter the inner door to get the inmate out of the unit. When individuals are housed in 3 South, they're only given 1 hour out a day. That's a 23-hour lockdown. When they are out for their hour, they're given access to use the phones, use the multi-purpose room, or to take a shower. This is the control booth in 3 South. The officer that is in here is responsible for opening the doors
Never a
to
version
the
of the control
units and the
booth.
doors inside the units to allow the officer in the unit to gain access to the inmates. So this is our medical facility. The difference between this jail and some smaller jails is that we have medical staff to treat inmates for more minor issues instead of sending them out to the hospital for every issue. The individuals that work here as medical staff are able to assist inmates in wound care.
Who's going berserk?
and
Sorry, I
other
think I
basic
missed something.
needs.
I was checking.
And they also provide their medication at the units. That's it. Hope you enjoy.
Okay. So, okay, this okay. Okay, let's see if there's anything else. Okay, so the other thing I was gonna look at is the Panopticon, but I wanted to kind of go. Okay, so we're gonna go here.
The Panopticon.
There we go. So this person is just kind of like gonna be narrating over kind of like a 3D model of the Panopticon and talking about a bit. I'm gonna go to Modern Marvels just for a little bit. Small preamble to this. They were showing different military tech ways to kind of like breach walls and stuff like that if there's like a riot.
A lot of technology has been developed just for the correctional industry, but a lot of the development that has come out of defense activities has been now applied to the correctional industry.
The toughest and most incorrigible inmates are housed in super maximum security prison units, which generally have the most advanced technology.
Supermax facilities have evolved as a concept in the last 10 years to deal with some of the most problematic inmates in the system, to get them out of the rest of the facilities in the system. So we're just going to get them in an environment where we can really batten down the hatches.
So it goes back to what she was talking about, like the more like the need, quote, for more security. So I am then gonna go to 602 there. Bam. Okay, this is gonna talk about the first prison.
Prison design was almost an afterthought. Very structures that were built for other purposes were adapted for use as holding cells, but had not been designed initially with the intention of making them prisons.
The first known system of prisons was a series of dungeons built above the main sewers in Rome between the 3rd and 1st centuries BC. Here, prisoners were confined in large rooms. From the 4th century and until the Renaissance, the Roman Catholic Church contributed.
Okay, so I remember that. It was Rome were first prisons, and then it became it got evolved when the church became involved centuries later.
Greatly to the evolution of the prison. Throughout Europe and in England, church authorities imprisoned both clergy and lay people who violated canon law. They were housed in monasteries and abbeys.
Okay, so this one talks about like monks' punishments, and then we're gonna go to secular prisons. Yeah, secular prisons. Okay, there we go.
And the development of public law.
So when there was a more separation, it's not the correct term, but it's like the division between church and state. There became like a distinct difference between prisons made and used by religious organizations, and then prisons made and used by non-religious organizations.
Castles and fortresses
always were built with strong rooms on lower levels to store material in case the castle was under siege. Those rooms could be used later, particularly when castles had no military value. They could be used to house prisoners.
Ruling monarchs used castles such as the Tower of London or France's Bastille to lock away political rivals.
Okay.
By the 15th...
So now that we're gonna go back to that in a little bit. Let me see, make sure. Sacred prisons. Okay. So we're gonna go to this like, no, I think, yeah, okay. Okay, I'm trying to make sure I structure this properly, just because like it's gonna be a bit weird. Okay, so okay. So this one's like, hey, do you know the United States has the largest prison population on the planet? Oh man, I love living here. Okay, and then okay, there. 1, 2, 3. Okay. So this one is going to be talking about architecture reform and the Panopticon. So I'm going to first pop us over to this video right here. This kind of gives us a rundown of the Panopticon, and then we can go back to the Marvel's one so we can get like another view of it.
Is the form of the ideal prison. Designed around 1787 by English philosopher Jeremy Bentham. Over 300 prisons around the world follow this model. A circle of diameter of 100 feet. Around the perimeter of this circle stretch cells.
Turn up a little bit.
Each cell is 9 feet deep, and 48 per floor. Each cell has a toilet, a bed, and space to work. The cells rise 6 floors. On every other floor, there is a surveillance corridor, in which a guard may survey 2 floors of prisoners. The guard watches the prisoners, but the prisoners do not see the guard and do not know when they are watched, and must therefore act as if they were always watched. 3 guards each see 96 prisoners, which makes 288 prisoners total. In the centre of the space, there is an auditorium, in which the prisoners may assemble to be lectured. A wall of screens.
In more modern versions of this, it's more like a tower. If you guys ever seen the first Guardians of the Galaxy, there is essentially a Panopticon used where like all the main characters kind of meet in a prison, but they're in a prison, and is somewhat designed like the Panopticon, where there's like a tower in the middle watching out for the other people.
They rise surrounding the chapel and separating the prisoners from seeing into it, or from seeing each other from across the void of the empty space in middle. Spiral staircases ascend through the space.
I just want to say, the person that did this did a fantastic job, like, building this up. It's, like, really good.
And an iron and glass frame rises through the space and vaults over the chapel. This completes the Panopticon, the form of the ideal prison.
To say all in one word, the Panopticon will be found applicable, I think, without exception, to all establishments whatsoever.
Jeremy Bentham.
See, the music with it is very unsettling. We're gonna go back to Modern Marvels, and we're gonna look at the architecture reform Panopticon.
Back in the mid-1800s, a wave of architectural reform swept through prisons. Englishman Jeremy Bentham proposed new designs to make prisons more secure and easily managed. One of the popular designs Bentham instituted was called the Panopticon Plan.
And the arrangement of these prisons had to be that the governor could look from the windows of his central hub house into all the cells that radiated like...
So this is, you can already tell this is very different than the 3D model that person went through. That one was a bit more elaborate. This one is more like a tower that's looking out to the other people in the cell. Yeah, that is it Michel Foucault? I think it was Michel Foucault. I would have to pull my book down. Talked about like the Panopticons, like the mental game the Panopticon plays with you, where it's like it's not just the the watch guard watching you, it's also other people watching you. So it like instills like a sense of paranoia.
Spokes of a wheel from that center. And the idea was that he could keep an eye not only on the inmates but also on the guards. It didn't work very well.
The panopticon design didn't work because the architecture made it impossible for the governor to see all areas of the institution from his office. In America, a prominent...
Yeah, so like, though I think like though it didn't work exactly how they wanted, I think like the paranoia of it like kind of had like an effect. You know what I mean? Like it isn't. It's one thing I've noticed like watching through this this like video is that there's always like something that doesn't quite work with the specific architecture that they choose to use or system they choose to compensate for what they want in this particular like location or prison or population. So we have the Panopticon, and then we are going to now look at the Eastern Penitentiary. So that one is okay. So yeah, that's up next. So okay. I'm trying to make sure I don't get ahead of myself. But yes, we're looking at the Eastern Penitentiary part. I'm gonna pause up time to kind of shift over to like at least 2 websites I have pulled up, just so I'm not like just watching this.
For the governor to see all areas of the institution from his office. In America, a prominent doctor named Benjamin Rush had other ideas about what a prison should look like. He believed prisons should remove not only the dangerous people from society, but also they should try to reform inmates into law-abiding citizens. With that in mind, the Quakers helped establish the first true prison in America, called the Walnut Street Jail.
So it's the Quakers. They didn't just make oatmeal; they made prisons.
A place where inmates would do penance. Hence, the term penitentiary was created.
Yep.
It consisted of a series of.
It's a pretty like that's actually interesting. Like that sort of evolution came from like being like more religious focused. It will I don't include any of like the solitary confinement pieces that are in this video, but they say like a lot of these practices with solitary confinement came from like prayer and self-reflection on like what your wrongs have, reflecting on your wrongs. But we know nowadays that solitary confinement is very detrimental to the people who are forced to like do that, forced to be like locked away by themselves. That like it causes like severe harm to people.
But as the Walnut Street Jail became seriously overcrowded, they planned to build a large prison, now a state prison.
This resulted in the construction of Eastern State Penitentiary in Philadelphia, which adopted the Quaker philosophy of punishment by solitary confinement.
Okay,
it later
so yeah,
became known as the Pennsylvania system.
So go back here. So this is the Eastern State Penitentiary. So I kind of like pull a couple of websites. So this is where you can see what it looks like right nowadays, as it like cuts back to these different pieces of footage. I have to check down. I think in this one is it has the floor, not the floor plan, but the like the site plan. So I'm gonna go down here. No, okay, it's not this one, but this is sort of like an overview. Pretty interesting. I'll go here. This is one I want to go settle. So this is like a photo of like what it looks like currently today. And I want to go, okay. Okay, in the decades following the American Revolution, a major intellectual export to come out of the newly formed United States was prison design and reform. By the early 19th century, the Pennsylvania system of justice had been developed, replacing corporal punishment with Quaker-inspired isolation and labor. Proponents believed that criminals who reflected deeply on their crimes by spending their days in 24 hours of silence would become genuinely penitent for their crimes and would, as a result, be reformed. But we all know, like, locking people away by themselves for, like, days and days and days, like, does severe mental harm to people. Go. Opened in 1829, Eastern State Penitentiary became quickly the archetype for this revolutionary system of justice. Equally notable for its architecture and mechanical advances, Eastern State served as the structural and ideological model for more than 300 prisons around the world. And architect John Haviland's radial design. Okay, let me restart that again. My brain is just not wanting to work. You drink some water? Okay. From the top. Okay. In architect John Haviland's radial design, cell blocks of the prison extend outward from a central surveillance area. In the block were prisoners' private cells, each with a adjacent outdoor exercise yard enclosed by a 10-foot wall. Prisoner cells were equipped with central heat, running water, flushing toilets, and skylights, at a time when such innovations were rarely available in homes, let alone prisons. Now we go down here. I'm trying to remember. So this is some photos of what the interior looks like now. But I actually want to new tab. Show off this. So this is basically the center, and then each of these branches branch off from here. And there are some extra side buildings, I believe. This one. Okay, there. Oop. I think it was side buildings, or I'm remembering something different. Maybe I remember something different, but like, this is huge, and we'll find out that this prison design as well didn't work for a very specific reason. So we're gonna go back to Marvels, and they're gonna give us a little 411.
Eastern was a radical departure in prison architecture. This floor plan shows its radial cell block design.
So the design was set up in this hub and spoke manner.
So you see like that? It's like hub and spoke, but more like kind of like the Panopticon, but like more like what the older gentleman sorry. In the first video we watched where the older gentleman was talking about previous designs, this is more like the guard has to now travel all the way down back and forth to see everyone in their cell. There is going to be more manpower you need to have people like constantly patrolling than if you were to have them like more facing the center where you can see everybody.
In order to improve supervision of the inmates and thereby prevent escapes.
The philosophy behind Eastern was to keep the inmates separate from each other, to prevent them from forming gangs and organizing riots or escapes. When a prisoner first arrived, he was escorted to his cell with a hood over his head.
This is fucking crazy. I'm not gonna lie, when I heard that, I'm like, excuse me? Why would you do that? You take him to an execution?
Could not see the other prisoners or where he was going, and they in turn could not see him.
The prison was designed in the way it was to ensure that the prison could carry out its philosophy of solitary confinement for all of the inmates.
By 1820 standards, Eastern was massive, with nearly 11 acres inside its walls. The outside wall was 1/2 mile around and 8 feet thick at the base. Eastern was one of the first prisons to build towers. The front building was 200 feet long, with a square tower turret at each end. It also had a guard tower on the roof of its central rotunda.
The cells were quite large enough that an inmate would not only have his living space, but also room for a workbench, a loom, machinery, tools, raw materials, whatever he needed in order to do his assigned work, which could be everything from...
So even back then, there was like a focus on like having prisoners basically be like labor, essentially labor for the state. Yeah. There is I don't know if I particularly time-stamped it here, but there was a discussion on whether the prison is surrounded by walls or it's more open really like denotes like its view on like criminals and rehabilitation. Like the higher the walls or the more thickness of the wall, not thickness of the walls, but like when there's a separation between like them and the rest of society, it shows you how society views criminals.
Weaving or dyeing cloth, making shoes, caning chairs, things of this nature. It all was done in the individual cell.
But the hub and spoke architecture of Eastern Penitentiary had many design flaws.
Okay, here we go, the design flaws.
It was expensive to design, build, and operate a prison of this kind because the rooms, the individual cells, had to be so large. And also because having the inmates by themselves, working by themselves, they could not take advantage of the techniques of factory production. So there was less opportunity to make money for the inmates to produce revenue for the institution.
So it's basically giving them like a bit of comfort with the space in their rooms was detrimental to the amount of people that get stuff. Like, so like, let me see. I actually made a prison in in Blender. I like designed like a sort of like a prison sort of like room and holding cell for like a visual novel I like made for like a game jam thing. Let me get that. Let me see. Sometimes Blender is a bit funky when you're trying to grab stuff. So I pull up here. Come on. There we go. Okay. Bam. Okay, so it's... Come on. Oh, fuck. Okay, I guess I have to grab it another way. Give me a second. So when I kind of go into the kind of the standards and practices of like architecture design, there is like a very narrow allowance for space for like prisoners' cells. So yeah, I'm gonna delete that. I don't need that. And I'll go bam. So this is kind of like me kind of using the sort of the jail design like standards to kind of make a room. So if I like kind of drop down here, you see how very like tight and small. I gave them like a bed and like a table and a toilet. But like a lot of these are very, very tight and close together. And a lot of the ones I was looking at, I was trying to find like good examples are usually 2 stories, probably more, with like a path that leads you down to like sort of like a not a mess hall, but like a gathering sort of area, kind of like what that lady was showing in her sort of like virtual tour. But that one was obviously more crowded because it had like a secondary hallways covered with like a fence, not barbed wire, but like a... I guess fence is the only word I can think of. Then I have like, let me pull this here. I don't have my, this is shown off as textureless because I like moved this so there's no texture. And there is like a hallway, then I have it branching off. Yeah. So it's I'm sorry, it's a bit, this is kind of my old architecture project. So it's kind of like, I think it's a bit taller than it would normally be. It'd probably be a lot shorter. But you have to kind of like fuck with the dimensions a bit when you're trying to like render a piece. Just because like your camera can like distort how things come out when you're rendering. Control Z. Okay. I'm gonna do that. I am gonna close this because I don't need it open anymore. Because I showed you guys that. We're gonna go, let me see. Okay, so we're done with this. I want to go to another part. 1942. Okay, 42. Okay.
This is all
Here we go. This is Sing Sing.
that remains of Sing Sing's original cell block today.
They realized that they could put more inmates in a given space if they stacked them on top of each other. So they built cells on top of cells.
To control the swinging grill doors from a central location at the end of the tier, there's this device at the top of the cells. In later years, a new locking technology appeared, which was less vulnerable to tampering. It let staff open 50 cells at one time by pulling a lever. It was safer and more efficient for prison staff.
The advantage was that you could open all the cells at the same time. It was a new thing. You didn't have to individually key lock or key open each cell, which is what you had to do before that.
But if an officer had to open a cell individually, he would use a 5-inch long paracentric key. It has grooves which cover over the center of the key. It originated in the early 1900s to open the lever tumbler lock. Some prisons, like Sing Sing, still use it today.
Another thing I noticed is that there seems to be... No, actually, no, we're gonna get to that. Never mind. I was like, oh, did I mark that bit? Yeah.
The paracentric key was later upgraded to today's oversized style, called a maxi mogul key. It is used for pin tumbler locks at more modern prisons, and is harder for inmates to replicate.
Okay, let's get that. Okay, so they talk a bit about Alcatraz, but I don't want to cover Alcatraz too much, because I'm gonna go a bit further into the Eastern Penitentiary. But I don't mind like doing a separate stream on specifically Alcatraz, just because that one's a very interesting prison. But we're gonna go to this other part, which I thought was pretty interesting. Pull it up. There we go. Okay.
Responsibility of the state who's operating the facility.
What's important in prison design is that it makes it easy for officers to see inmates in a cell block. Some architects provide 3D computer animation to prison authorities before construction, so that they can confirm that the structure being built will serve their needs.
Well, one of the important things in designing a facility, a correctional facility, is for the officers, they're supposed to be supervising what is going on.
So at least for this design, there is a focus on having like as much visibility as possible. So there's like windows.
Make sure they can see everything. Second thing is
they could also, I assume, like they could also like substitute these windows for like wire or just bars if they want.
Acoustically being able to hear. In a housing unit, we try to design these so that an officer in a unit can kind of be aware of what's going on around him, just in terms of noise level, activity levels. If a fight breaks out or a scuffle, he can hear that. He can respond to it immediately.
The most common approach to maximum visual design is a central control room.
So the older gentleman talked about like the central control room, and this is like a more like we saw this in the young ladies tour, but this like I think is a bit more of what you think about when you visualize like a central control for a prison.
Basically, the officer is in a glass room that has remote controls and remote communication into housing units.
This design is called a pod. The officer sits at the center, surrounded by cells on both sides. Surveillance cameras line the cell blocks.
Yes, so this was also related to that the older gentleman, where he's like, okay, so you have the central pod, and then you have the pods where the other prisoners are located.
As a result of the riots that were taking place across the country in the 70s, there were changes in the designing for what is the most useful number of inmates to have in any housing area, and what is the best way to arrange the configuration. And around the country, you'll see the podular units.
Yes.
The design and construction of cells have also changed.
We're down to the prefabrication. So when you're looking at redundancy, so I did a project for homelessness. It was basically trying to combat homelessness by using prefabbed units placed in a parking garage. So the benefits of like a prefab like unit is that you save on materials and construction. It's just brought to your location. You do have to pay for like transportations and such, but like they're going to talk about like what specifically is beneficial for these because of the nature of prisons.
Some jails, like Rikers Island in New York City, use cells that are prefabricated in a factory in Pennsylvania. They are made of concrete and steel. and are delivered by truck in units which consist of 2 cells, joined by a plumbing and electrical closet. The cell units are hoisted by crane into a prepared steel structure, which is the framework of the jail. The precast construction also serves as a safety feature by making it almost impossible for an inmate to break off any part of the cell to fashion a weapon. Next to the cell is a safety feature that provides security for prison staff, should the cell have a maintenance problem.
In the past,
yeah, so these are not directly connected to the cells, they're on the exterior of the cell. He's gonna tell you, like, they are able to do work if there's any, like, issues with plumbing or water or anything. They don't have to, like, get people out. They basically don't have to vacate cells to do any type of maintenance and such. So I thought that was pretty interesting with this video. And I think I'm done with this video for now. So what we are gonna now move on to is I'm gonna pull up this. Oh. We're gonna look at this for a little bit. So this is, make sure you can see with me. Okay. So this is the 3rd edition of the jail design, or like standards for the Department of Justice. I picked out a couple like interesting blurbs. I know, like, looking back on it, I know I missed something very specific I wanted to like go into, which was like jail room size. I felt that was very interesting, but like if I can't quickly find that, then we'll just move on because I don't want to bore you guys with me hunting through a PDF. I'm gonna drink some water and then we're gonna get into a bit of this. Okay, so this is the foreword in the jail design. So this is the 3rd edition. The 3rd edition. I have like the 2 other editions, but I figured those do not matter currently. And they kind of talk about like the difference between this and the previous editions. New jail construction is a major capital undertaking that often represents the single largest project in which county officials will ever be involved. Many local jurisdictions are placing outdated facilities as well as expanding bed space to accommodate increased numbers of inmates. The U.S. Department of Justice Bureau of Justice Statistics reports that as of June 2008, the total rated capacity of the nation's jails was 813,502 beds, up from an estimated 677,787 beds at mid-year 2000. So this 3rd edition was made in 2011. Very weird. Yes. So okay. So put in here, the Jail Design Guide 3rd edition is revised and expanded version of the original small jail design guide published in 1988. So the first older guy talked about like the change in prison design in the 1980s. Oh no, my voice is going. The focus of what is now simply entitled the Jail Design Guide. The 3rd edition was brought in for 2 reasons. Increase in local jail populations had significantly reduced the demand for new jails of only 50 or fewer beds. So, they're building bigger prisons. That's what that's saying. And there's less of a focus on smaller prisons because of that. Reflection and feedback on the previous edition have made it clear that most of the issues raised in the original document apply equally to jails of any size. So the scale doesn't change like what you need for all of them. I think that is it for that. So when I had to do how to say it? Let me drink some more water. I don't get used to it, but when I had to do a class project and it was about I don't know if it was about specifically. I know I picked jails and the Panopticon specifically, but I found like this section to be like the most like I won't say upsetting, but kind of like sad. So we're talking about I'll just read the whole page. Like, I'm pretty sure I'm not gonna get in trouble for reading this because it's like you don't buy this. It's a standard that you have to follow. The jail projects an image and sends a message to the people who pass by it. Pass by, visit, work, or are confined there. Although the way each person responds to the jail depends on why he or she is there, the building's image helps people recognize the type of place it is and establish their expectations of what will happen there and how they will be treated and how they should behave. I'm gonna go to the description of the exterior. The outside of the building conveys a message to the public about law enforcement and the role of the jail in the community. Jurisdictions should decide whether they wish to convey an image of community service, deterrence, frugality, or some other quality. In considering the jail's appearance, jurisdictions should take into account the context in which it will be located. If it is to be located downtown, it may be important to repeat the materials, colors, and scale of surrounding buildings so that it fits in. If the jail is to be near or adjacent to other government buildings, it is probably desirable for the jail to complement those buildings to create a unified identifiable government image. So that's kind of when you are building buildings close to other buildings, depending on what the building's purpose is, what it's meant to do, what you want to convey, like generally, you do try to either match the materials of the surrounding space, or you try to go against it, but like in a way that complements other buildings. So when we talk about building height, if other buildings are about like 1-story, 2-story, you won't build like a 6-story, 8-story building right next to it. You try to like complement the height of surrounding buildings. So that's done with that. So go to the interior. The interior image and character of jail environment will. Sorry, I got ahead of myself. Let me restart. The interior image and character of the jail environment will be most important to staff and inmates, but will also be important to visitors. The interior of the jail can also express and reinforce an expectation about inmate behavior, since all people tend to respond to their environment. Okay. This is why good church design inspires quiet and reverence, why good field house design encourages openness and participation, and why good office design enhances productivity. These concerns must be balanced against the perception of elected officials and the public. Let me just highlight that. An interior that appears to be too nice to the casual observer can be interpreted as an intent to coddle inmates and create a hotel quality environment. So when I saw this, I was like pretty shocked that they would go like, oh hey, so you kind of need to make your prison look like shit because it needs to make other people think that you're not treating the prisoners well. It's really fucked up. The mission statement of the jail, see Chapter 2, will go a long way towards setting the aesthetic tone for the interior of the building. The research has shown that where jails have eliminated the symbol of incarceration and provided a more normal setting, there have been positive effects on inmate behavior. Example, a reduction in vandalism, assault, and stress, as long as this approach is rooted in the actual operational philosophy used to manage the inmates. These jails tend to use elements such as carpet on the floor, wood cell doors, non-fixed furnishing, bright colors, and lots of daylight. Although using these features may seem counter to ideas about what makes a jail secure, inmates tend to treat the jail with more respect if its design communicates to them that they are also going to be treated with respect. Of course. So there's another part I want to go into that I found very interesting. So a very interesting piece that I saw when I was looking at this. So I just focus on this diagram here. The windows are supposed to be placed up here so that the prisoners and the people entering the prison don't meet. Like their eyes don't meet. So as like a way to kind of like limit the awkwardness of like seeing a person that's in prison. So if there is like a window that's down here, there's a wall blocking off like people from the people not in the prison from people inside the prison. So there is a there is like a term used, like it's here, it's called the envelope of the building. So it's basically the, when I say envelope, it may be the exterior facade / structure of the building and how you design it and how it's perceived by those who are either looking in or out of it. When designing a building, the envelope is like one of the important pieces that you need to figure out to communicate what your design is going to be. Whether it's going to be like a barnyard house where like it's like very stretched out long, or something that's just a cube. Those elements very much matter to like what you're trying to convey. So you talk about like sound buffers here. So this specifically is talking about like the courtyard to sound buffers to like the visiting. So you're trying to keep a separation, like a almost like isolating them from the outside world, but also isolating people from the inside of the reality of the prison. It's more about making the people who are visiting the prison more comfortable than the people who are within the prison. Okay, this is another important thing. This is about separation from now public to public areas. But I think like the most important thing you should like learn here, it's about like allocation of space. So when you are what's what I'm looking for? Laying out like a space, let's say like if you're gonna do like a school, you have to figure out where everything's gonna be like centralized. So you have like bubbles to kind of like break up, like, okay, so the lunch room is going here, and then the library is going here, the gym is going here. And like using this sort of like method is very helpful to kind of figure out how you want to connect your spaces, and as well as for movement between these spaces. So that's one of thresholds. Like where your thresholds are and where everything connects is like incredibly important. I want to thank everyone for stopping by. So that's the end of my